तो अपने आप में खास है ही। तालियां एक बार जोरदार हो जानी चाहिए। और कितनी खुशी की बात है जब आप में से कोई उठकर बताता है कि हर गजल कविता होती है और हर कविता गजल नहीं होती, और एक गजल में मक्ता होता है, गजल का एक शेर दूसरे से अलग हो या ना हो जरूरी नहीं होता। बहुत बहुत आभार आपका। अगला सेशन हम शुरू करने जा रहे हैं। रीता जी से निवेदन करूंगा कि उसका परिचय आपको दें। तालियां एक बार हो जाएं, तालियां एक बार हो जाएं। और जो इधर उधर खड़े हैं महानुभाव, उनसे निवेदन है कि सीट आप ले लें। बहुत खूबसूरत अगला सेशन होने जा रहा है और आपकी उपस्थिति बहुत अच्छी सुबह से है, तो हम चाहते हैं कि लगातार आपका वो प्यार, वो जुड़ाव, वो लगाव दिखता रहे। तो जो जगह खाली है आप उसे भर दें ताकि अगला सेशन हम शुरू करें। आइए जी।
Shukriya, Pradeep ji. We'll move on to our next session. The pursuit of justice is a cornerstone of any civilized society. Throughout history, landmark legal cases and judgments have played a pivotal role in shaping the course of justice, influencing the development of laws and protecting the rights of individuals and communities. In our next segment, Legal Landmarks Charting the Path of Justice, our panelists, who are legal luminaries, discuss the most significant and impactful legal milestones that have transformed the fabric of justice. Our first speaker is Ms. Pinky Pandey. Pinky Anand, I'm very sorry, ma'am, is Ms. Pinky Anand, a senior advocate at the Supreme Court of India and former Additional Solicitor General of India and former Additional Advocate General of the state of Uttarakhand, along with former head of the All India Legal Cell at the Bharati Janata Party. She has received several awards of excellence in law, including FICCI and Bharat Nirman, and has fought many landmark cases. An erudite speaker, a writer, she's active in social issues. Her recent book, Raising the Bar, you understand, Raising the Bar, explores some cases and judgments that have shaped the citizenry and the country going forward. Ma'am, could we have you on stage? Thank you. Please, a big round of applause. Ma'am has come specially from Delhi to help this session. Next, I'd like to invite Ms. Saudamini Sharma, a lawyer practicing in the Supreme Court of India and the high courts around the country, practicing company law, labor law, private, international law, matrimonial, criminal, taxation, and constitutional matters. Ma'am, anything else left? She has worked extensively with various government departments and ministries and speaks often on contentious and emerging issues from women's right to politics. Ma'am, please. The moderator for the conversation is Mr. Animesh Sharma, who is an advocate practicing in our very own Punjab and Haryana High Court and specializes in matters related to constitutional law. So I will hand the stage over to Mr. Animesh. And I would also like to share with you that all our sessions are being live streamed on YouTube channel. So in case anyone has missed any session, you can go back and see that. Of course, live streaming is, if you're here live, you can see it live. I would also request all those who are standing out there to please come and take seats. It'll be a very interesting session, so I hope you enjoy it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Can I start by saying how pleasurable it is for me to be on stage with both of you? Dr. Anand, your name needs no introduction in the legal circles. And for me, it's a sense of personal pride to be on stage with Sodamini because she's one of my oldest friends. And today I feel definitely a sense of personal pride to be on stage with her.
Thank you.
Dr. Anand, let me start by asking you, I know how busy a lawyer you are. I know how time-consuming litigation is. How did you find the time to write this lovely book? And I also want to ask, how did the collaboration between the two of you work?
So let me start with saying a couple of things which are off your question. So the first thing is, actually, I'm delighted to be at the Chandigarh Literary Festival because for the last 11 years, I have been with the Jaipur Lit Fest day in and day out and a couple of other festivals. But this is the first time that I've had an occasion to come to the Chandigarh Literary Festivals. And two of the reasons that I'm here, one is Sodamini and the second is you.
Thank you.
Sodamini is a homegrown Chandigarh girl, as you know. So basically, when we talked about Chandigarh, and Chandigarh indeed is a delightful place. So it is the right place for an artist, writer, author to be there so that you could actually develop it. And I was very happy to see in the morning that we've had a true mix of Punjabi. I'm a Punjabi myself, so not great difficulty. I'm not very erudite on it, but I'm all right. So on this level, to have something here at the Sukna Lake, I think is the most tremendous of activities, and I see paintings across too. So you can really develop this even more. So thanks for that. But now talking about the question that you asked, how did I find the time? I don't know how I find the time. I flew in from Bombay yesterday, and I barely made it to the flight to Chandigarh because I decided there was no point going. I was there for a case which took time out of me, energy out of me, and I barely made it to the flight. I had to carry my baggage on the flight because there was no time for check-in. It was an Indigo flight. So, but you know, I multitask from my childhood. So I've never had a time where I could sit down with one thing and be happy. I'll share with you when I was being interviewed for the INLAX fellowship. I'm an INLAX fellow. So when I was being interviewed by the Italian count, no less, very impressive. It's a family of Indra Lakshmi called INLAX, and a lot of us are now familiar with it. In my year, it was the first year. But he told me that you are like one of those people who is 6 men in search of an author. So you have to find the author who will fit you into a situation. I think that's where I am. I like doing things. I like being involved. I like to delve into things. But the inspiration ultimately for the book, I had written some legal texts. So I've written for Thomas Reuter, which is a book for lawyers. But this inspiration really came because I was at the Jaipur Lit and I was with Shobha De and Barkha and others. And we were just chatting. I was speaking on some subject. They said, why don't you write a book? I said, okay, why not? They said, write a book which is for laymen. It is not for lawyers, not a legal text. You know, otherwise, a legal text is a very different thing. So I said, well, okay. So you have to give me a germ of an idea. And if I get the germ of an idea and I find well-wishers around, people who appreciate, and something that I would like to do. So it was a challenge of sorts, but at the same time, something that I enjoyed. How I found the time is way beyond me. But ultimately, I tend to work almost 14 hours a day on an average, 7 days a week variety. I'm criticized for that. My daughter keeps saying, what the heck are you doing and why don't you find time off? Sodamini keeps criticizing. She's worked with me for 10 years. And thankfully, Sodamini's English is near perfect. Comes from a family, esteemed family, a mother sitting there. She's a professor who is the principal of a school here in, principal of a college in Chandigarh. So we started talking and then we started developing. And God has been very kind. So I have had the fortune of doing cases, which are commercial. I've had the fortune of doing cases which are human rights. I've had the fortune of doing cases which are controversial. I've had the fortune of doing cases which are bizarre. I've had the fortune of doing cases that are murder included and conspiracies. In fact, yesterday's case was one of such kind. I can't talk about it because it's right now in court. But, and I've had the chance actually to work as the Additional Solicitor General of India on cases that changed the course of history. And I was party to them. I saw it happening. I was able to respond to them. And because of my social / political skills, call it, or knowledge or experience, I was able to add that into the surface. And that's adding onto the surface, I think, is what makes the difference. So that's basically long and short of what I did. So I'll again tell you, I was doing the Legal Balance show for Doordarshan. So I used to run this TV show where we used to do legal interviews between each other at a time, of course, when you didn't have technology as high as it was. But I used to start working on that program after finishing my law cases, etc. at 11. I used to start at 12 at night, work till 3 with a dot matrix printer, which used to exist for those days, and still manage. And actually, you learn. I like learning. I like engaging. I think it makes you a complete human being. So what better way to communicate with each other than to write, to talk, to be part of these Chandigarh Lit Fest? And that's the way it works. Collaboration with Sodamini. That was the second question.
Yes.
I haven't forgotten. You're like a judge who asks a question and I'm supposed to remember what it is. So collaboration with Sodamini is very difficult. Very difficult. Wasn't
can
easy,
imagine.
but I would have nobody else but her to work with. So here we are fighting it out, trying to get things through. She's trying to get me to find the time. She harasses me. I harass her. And then the point is when you're doing active work to find the time for creativity. That is the challenge. How do you create things? How do you create something which is interesting? And this was a challenge, as I said. Writing a legal text for me was like the back of my hand. I could do it anytime. I've done it. But writing it in such a way that it is of interest to people who go behind. You're not writing what happened only in the court. You're writing what went behind a person's mind. You're writing behind what are the conspiracies which went behind the scenes. You're writing about things that didn't come out. You're writing about what finally came out of the story. And the last thing which I think is of interest is that people are interested in, it's like crime sells. Crime sells like nothing else sells. And again, human interest stories carry interest. Commercial cases, I think, by and large, don't carry interest. It's money. 100,000 crores, no problem. But it's not interesting enough for you. But it is what is of interest is if somebody had an affair with somebody, somebody got married, there was a triangle. If somebody got prosecuted, if somebody didn't get prosecuted, if somebody ran behind the scenes, you have people like Charles Sobraj. Now, who the heck is not interested in Charles Sobraj? I was interested, forget, and I've met Charles Sobraj in prison. So I was fascinated with him. Charles Sobraj, in Tihar jail, I would meet him and he would actually sit there helping out other prisoners. He used to sit and fill their forms. So you go in, I used to work on legal aid schemes those days. I used to work for some pittance, but I used to do that as a social service. And he fascinated me as a person. And of course, then when he ran out in Goa, if you remember, he ran out and was caught there. He actually just wanted to escape the jail prison. It was very simple. Sometimes law is very elementary. It's simple human mind at its best. And that's what you want to do. And therefore, challenges are very acceptable. And it's something that we look for, and that's what keeps us going.
And I must say, I think you've succeeded on this aspect surely, because when I read the book, I definitely found that I could read it as a lawyer as well, but the stories that the book discusses, from Sanjay Dutt, for example, to Charles Sobraj, to honor killings, different subjects which delve into a lot of what individual rights are and are also at the same time entertaining stories. So definitely on that front, I think the both of you succeeded very well. It reads as a very interesting book, not only from a legal point of view, but even generally as a good, interesting book to read with good stories to read. But let me come to the book and the chapters that you've discussed. And your book starts with a somber chapter, which is perhaps one of India's darkest phases when the country went through an emergency. And you talk about the case that led to the emergency and how Indira Gandhi's election was set aside by the Allahabad High Court, and then eventually the Supreme Court reversed the judgment. But the first thing I want to ask, do you have active memories of how the emergency was?
Absolutely. I mean, I think today's surface of politics is actually based out of an era of emergency. And I was, at that time, of course, just out of school into college. So basically, you're talking about the period when I was in college. And the maximum activity, the maximum people who were involved in the action against the emergency were all part of the university. So we were all actively there. And it was actually only a question of who's in jail and who's not in jail. My only fault is one, I never went to jail. And that's one of the impediments I suffered, because I think to be an absolutely active politician, you need to be in jail in emergency. But I wasn't there. However, I was party to everybody else who was in jail and ultimately saw this happening. And it was actually a mind-boggling experience. I think today time has shown that you can't take away people's rights. My rights are my rights, your rights are your rights, and nothing in the world. And that's what today we are proud of in India. The fact that anything happens, you can approach the court. The judicial process, the justice delivery system is such that you can get there. There's some delay, by the way. I mean, I'll put that caveat in and I'm not running away from there. But at the same time, you actually can take recourse to law. And the fact that Indira Gandhi's elections could be set aside, and they were set aside, never mind what happened with the position, it showed us the way. In fact, by the way, later on, the ADM Jabalpur case, which is the case on emergency, was ultimately reversed by a judgment of Justice Ganguly. And he ultimately held it was bad law, and that's what, but it is good to have. And then you had who? You had Justice Khanna. Justice Khanna gave his dissent on democracy, on what should happen, the process of law, and his son today, his nephew today, is the Chief Justice of India. I mean, this is a legacy that is taken. Imagine a person like Palkhiwala. Palki wala took on the brief and returned it and said, I won't appear for you.
Yes.
So, you have these things, and it is always sometimes good to have a blur in the past. That blur takes you the way forward. So today, nobody will dare to even think about any time. I'm not talking about today as in today. I'm talking about present or future. Nobody's ever going to think of it about taking people's rights. And I think the greatness of India today in the world, and I travel extensively, as all of you do, I'm sure. Travel in the world, you find India has acquired such a great name for itself, a standing and a credibility for itself. Now everybody is looking askance at India and saying, you mean something. I mean, my Harvard friends, you're having a Harvard get-together, and everybody's saying, please tell us what's going to happen to the world, because India is kind of the forerunner in the sequence. And being a democracy is not easy. Being a democracy is one of the toughest exercises that you have. Sometimes, it's not fair to say it in as many words, but let me say it. Dictatorship is easy. You have one line. It goes down that way and nobody else challenges it. But in democracy, you're constantly challenged. And that challenge, I think, is ultimately withstood the change of time. And that is what has made the judicial process, the justice delivery system, even more important and even more powerful. So that's why Justice Bhagwati said that the constitution is a sine qua non of law and justice in India. It's a sentinel. It's a sentinel on the qui vive. That is the words he used, and I think that stands for everything that we are here for today. And that is why the people in India actually can prosper, because you have faith. We need to have faith in our institutions. And our institutions stood itself out badly in ADM Jabalpur, and that was a black mark, but that was the last black mark that we have, and that's been a while back, and we've all learned the lesson, and we've all prospered with it, because now the basic structure of the constitution can't be changed in any manner.
You also discuss the serious problem of honor killings in your book, and that is a problem that perhaps Punjab and Haryana both actively face. These are litigations. As a personal experience, I can tell you the number of cases, the number of protection cases that come to the High Court here are numerous every day. People would come for as simply as seeking protection of life and liberty because they are in threat from their own families, and this keeps happening. And that is perhaps a shocking aspect of reality that these people face. Do you think, though, what is your view on courts in India and across different states granting or refusing to grant such protection to live-in couples?
We are all creatures of our times. We are all creatures of our thoughts. Societies are also creatures of the thoughts and the thoughts of the current time. I mean, honestly speaking, today, I think things have come to a stage where almost anybody, any court may not deny. But if you're talking about differences between courts, Punjab might have a slightly different approach to what Delhi might have and to what possibly, let's say, Tamil Nadu may have. So definitely Punjab has its own way of looking at things, and you see far many more cases in these circumstances. But having said that, I think today has come a time, and that's why, in fact, this book, Raising the Bar, actually, originally I was thinking of the title of Resurgent India, and how India has evolved, to change its mores, its thoughts, its ethics, its concept of morality. And we have now come to individual liberties in that sense, individual thought, collective identities. Everything is now to do with identity. I have broadly a right to do what I want to do, and what nobody should be able to stop me. And of course, if you go down the book, you'll find how we have described that ultimately in our ancient texts, and why only Indian ancient texts, and you go into Greek, you go into Roman, you go into every possible ancient text, you will find that every one of them had all these relationships being sanctified. It was not as if this was something wrong. It seems we've really been thrust with the Christian way of thinking. It's ultimately the British rule that laid down all these kind of rules of what should not happen, of this so-called concept of morality. It's like Bernard Shaw. Ultimately middle-class morality which is thrust down, when you actually are not impelled to do that by any concept of yourself or your collective identity. So I think honor killing and some of the most bizarre cases that I have seen. So, I had this Amina lady come in who is a Muslim, and a very good-looking, fair, young girl who had got married to a Hindu boy, and they ran away from home. Ultimately, they came back home because of some reasons. And then ultimately, her husband's brother. And finally, her husband, Rajneesh, was caught by the police. He died in jail. He died in jail. We moved for a petition seeking CBI inquiry. We did get a CBI inquiry from the Supreme Court, but by that time it was too late. That's another chapter. And finally, what happens is this lady, after her various stories of how she was harassed, how she was traumatized, was actually went back to her family and converted back to Muslim because there's no point. Her husband was dead. But these kind of bizarre stories. Another story which went and has been covered was of a professor who married again a Muslim girl who was picked up from India by her mother, sent to her Masi in Pakistan, ultimately died, sends a story on a receipt, at the back of a receipt. Please come and rescue me. It's Abhiram Biswal. His name was Abhiram Biswal. Abhiram, please come and rescue me. But please carry cyanide with you because if you are found here, you'll be killed. So before you are killed, you should kill yourself, literally. She didn't say in as many words, but cyanide means that only. And ultimately, she was dead. We filed a habeas corpus, but the problems were that it was a foreign country. We tried our best to get the body of the girl into the Indian High Commission so that ultimately that becomes Indian territory. By the way, all Indian High Commissions or Indian embassies are part of Indian territory, unlike the other part of the country, which is outside. But that didn't happen. But there we did fight and we did get rulings on the fact that you have a right of habeas corpus, that is for the production of a body of a person, and a person cannot be removed like that. So Shanti Bhushan had opposed us in Supreme Court, and this was a long time back. But it kept such a dent, and the recent past live-in relationships. So Chiranjeevi's daughter ran away, got married in fact, and came to Delhi and asked for a protection order. I was in fact gallivanting somewhere in Himachal when I got a call that you need to get protection. So, well, we moved the Delhi High Court, we got protection. And after that, I got threats. I got threats from everybody from top to toe, including Chiranjeevi's family, including people from abroad, because he had a fan following of the greatest order. Well, anyway, the story goes in another way at the end of the day. At the end of the day, they broke up. They had a child. They made me the godmother. Then thereafter, they got separated, they got divorced, they came to me for the divorce. I said, run away. I've done too much for you. I refuse to go into any other proceeding. She got remarried to a boy of her father's choice in a gold sari. I still remember that. I looked at that and said, well, good for her. But honor killing is something that really is almost today, at least conceptually, a matter of the past. Finally, we moved the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court put down guidelines. You know, all this concept of same marriage in the same gotra, in the same family, in the same caste, the way people have thought, is a matter of yester thought. We do have a matter of choice. So it all boils down to choice, my right, my decision. That, however, I'll enter a caveat, young people who are here, it doesn't mean I should do exactly what I want to. There is called something like a public good and a public order and something that does need to be looked at. So I'm all for family. I am not advocating. So remember when I did Khushbu's case. So Khushbu's case was a case of live-in. When she was not of her own, that's another matter. But she's now a member of NCW, by the way. And she herself ultimately advocated that what's wrong with live-in, you just should be careful. There was an interview she gave to Dina Tanti, a Tamil Nadu newspaper. 21 cases of defamation were filed against her all over Tamil Nadu. Anyway, I was fortunate enough to get her extricated and acquitted. In fact, the cases were quashed by the Supreme Court in a scathing judgment of the Madras High Court. But ultimately, I am not saying that we or anybody has the right to say what you should do. You should do what makes you happy. At the same time, I do believe strongly in the concept of family, in the concept of state, in the concept of public. So therefore, private good cannot take precedence over all public good. That's about all that I have to say. However, having said that, I think today the world is an open world. We are getting to this resurgent India that we are talking of, the bar having been raised. It was somewhere here. It has gone to here. We have some more glass ceilings to break, but a lot of them have been really taken over. And I'm proud to say that the judiciary, the justice delivery system has done a fair bit in all directions for that.
So Damni, let me put this question to you. Your book talks about the Sanjay Dutt trial and what he went through, and how the whole nation was, of course, gripped by his story. Do you think celebrities in India have it easier or harder, in quotes?
See, when we are looking at the celebrities right now, when you see the case with regards to, say, the death of Sushant Singh Rajput, they had it harder. They had it so much harder. That lady was vilified as a witch. She was vilified as somebody who did black magic or was feeding the man drugs or something. But when the Sanjay Dutt case had happened, because there was no media as we have now. Now media is rabid in its approach. You will have panel discussions and you will have people jumping on each other saying, no, this is what is happening and this is what is happening. When Sanjay Dutt had happened, the idea of actually vilifying a celebrity did not really exist as much as celebrating the celebrity did. So that time, I believe that they had it easier. See, Sanjay Dutt was found to be actively involved in a conspiracy. There were guns that were found. It was common knowledge that he was into substances and he had gone to rehab outside. Despite all that, he got off easy. Today, he lives a normal life. He has a family.
Celebrated.
He's celebrated. He's got movies that are, running in crores and everything. And when I look, when I was actually thinking about it a couple of days ago, when I look at how the lady who was then taken into that Sushant Singh Rajput case was taken in, it took her 3 years. That case happened in 2020 during the COVID lockdown when the suicide happened. It took her 4 years to be able to stand up and say that this is my life and I want to live it now. So it is now that she's coming out. Sanjay Dutt,
She became a scapegoat because
she became a
because
scapegoat.
the media went after her.
because the media went after her.
In her case, the celebrity
Correct.
nature of her own story and Rajput's story went
Because
against
I
her.
don't think now that, see, initially the celebrities were the stars, they were the heroes, but now people are actually looking to vilify them. People are actually saying that, okay, we'll find faults in you. So now I don't think it's a very easy game to play. Earlier, definitely. I mean, you look at Amitabh Bachchan, you look at Sanjay Dutt. Ma'am is very fond of all these old people. I don't really know too many of them.
Like this.
To them, these guys were actual heroes. When they would play these roles and fight off 5 gundas, people would throw coins and everything. Now it's a whole different world.
Can I add here?
Yes,
so
please.
I have just a slightly different take, and incidentally, I come from a film background. In the sense, my father was a film distributor, so I've grown up, and she's right, whether she calls it the old people or whatever, that I have looked up at stars, and I'm starstruck quite often. I've even sat on times when Chor Rani, was that movie of Rajesh Khanna, was there, and actually had nice photographs taken as a young kid when he was taking it. But having said that, I still think, aside from these couple of aberrations, celebrities are protected. Celebrities are protected, and I'll add one more thing. There's also a gender factor. So there's a gender factor in the sense this lady in Sushant Singh Rajput's case, the vilification happens easier for a woman than for a man.
Correct.
So I will stand with that. And the reason celebrities are protected is twofold. It's not only the fact that they are celebrities and treated like gods. They are cricketers, celebrities. Nowadays, even ministers, actually. Earlier, it wasn't so. But it is like that. So the point is, and not protection, I'm just talking about being celebrities. So having said that, the point is, aside from that, they also have their entire group. Look at Sanjay Dutt's case. If you look at Sanjay Dutt's case, all his friends helped to destroy AK-47s and the other arms, and they were all taken away and thrown out, burnt, removed. Everybody turned. There's hostile witnesses, and so many things happen. So you have a support of a system which is slightly larger in the context of male criminals, so to say, than female criminals. So you will find that females will go behind far easier in a way as criminals than men will go, even if they're celebrities and non-celebrities. But yes, once in a while, media actually acts in a big way. And I think the social discourse, today every person sitting here and sitting anywhere in their drawing rooms will be discussing a criminal case and to find out who the actual accused is. Take the Talwar case, Arushi Talwar case. I don't think there's anybody who wasn't guessing at who the criminal might be. And that's in fact one of our incentives for going in for these stories. And you find that when the book was written, you're actually looking behind the scene to see how the erstwhile Billa Ranga case, for example, happened in yesteryears of 80s, and how today you had the Nirbhaya happen. And so you're actually looking behind the scene. So the media is leaving no stone unturned and does help at times. Of course, The question of whether media trial is the right forum or not, I'll leave for a discussion for another day.
Yes, and just for people who haven't read the book as yet, you'll find stories of an 19th century serial killer woman from Calcutta. You'll find India's first bioterrorism case and various such other similar, very interesting murder mysteries, actually, which the book deals with. Dr. Anand, one perhaps important question, and before we run out of time, is the issue of ISIS brides that you also touch in your book. And the question that fascinated me from that discussion was, how do you balance state security interests with the children of these foreign fighters who are then left there? Because that question, how do you balance these equities? How does the state balance them?
There's no balancing of equity with state security. I think we've come to a stage when all of us Indians realize that state security is the highest order, and there is no manner in which you can compromise that. So there are instances, I mean, for example, in the case of these ISIS brides. Now, these people are people who were converted, brainwashed, taken away to Afghanistan and other parts of the world to create a new world order, and were actually brainwashed into that. And ultimately, at some point, if they change their mind, or when democracy came into Afghanistan, to actually bring them back. But how do you know that they have changed their mind or their heart? It's actually a subjective kind of issue. So when you talk about, there's precious little that we can do. It may be unfortunate in given cases, there is sympathies, the parents are here, the families are here, but you can't sacrifice national security, and we've stood high on that. And that's one of the biggest features. I mean, whether it is COVID attack, which is on a different level, we acted as if it was a national security issue, not only a health issue, but a national security issue. Whenever anybody has looked at us in any manner, we attack back. And if you have people who are capable of waging a war from within the country, I mean, I personally have done a lot of these anti-terrorist cases throughout the country and tried to protect. They are not evident. There's no evidence which is clearly visible at times. They are conspiracies. They are people who are colluding with each other. So if there's an element or an iota of doubt, I'm afraid national security takes precedence.
Security must trump.
Else. Yes.
There are so many other fascinating topics that the book deals with. I'll just touch upon them. There's Aadhaar and privacy. The book deals with transgender rights, triple tarak. The whole chapter on creative criminals, on active euthanasia versus passive euthanasia. So the book really deals with subjects which deals with individual rights as well as group rights. I would recommend everybody to read it. And before we run out of time, I think I'll open the floor to the audience if there are any questions. And yes, please.
Hi. Firstly, thank you so much, ma'am, for such an informative session. I am a final year law student myself from NLU Jodhpur. My question to both... Oh, are you an alum?
Yes.
Okay, that's wonderful. So my question to both Pinky ma'am and Sudhamani ma'am is, as a final year law student who has to step into the profession next year, what's that one piece of advice you would like to give to students like me?
All right. So to my interns, I say run away as fast as you can. They all make fun of me. But there's no way around working hard. You will have to start at the bottom. You will have to read your files, every single word. I am now 14 years into the profession. I am still screamed at by her every day. I'm not kidding. You can ask her.
Actually, I'll tell you, I don't want to answer her. She's talking all sorts of nonsense. I don't shout at her 15 times a day. I shout at her 30 times a day. But that's another part. Burn your heart. Your heart must burn. To do anything well, whether it's law or any other part of life. So whenever anybody is working with me on a matter, I say, let your heart speak for the case. You want to win the case. You may ultimately lose it. That's another matter. But you do everything that means to go for it. Secondly, don't have attitude. Don't have attitude on anything. Everything is part of the game. It's a hands-on situation even now. And it's even more so. We are developing law every day. You know how many laws we came out with recently? See the new criminal acts, for example. So you'll be grappling with so many things and you want to be part of that process of innovation. So look forward, look up, and let your heart always burn hard.
Thank you for that question. And I must thank both Dr. Anand and Sudhamani. I thoroughly enjoyed sharing the stage with you. Thank you once again.
Ma'am, it was truly an enlightening session, and I am sure our audiences have gained much from your, knowledge about the whole subject. Thank you so much, ma'am. Sure, sure, ma'am. Can we have a photo? We'll move on to our next session now, a much awaited session, and we have very, very honored guest.